the stream early just to test it, so. I really wanted Silas in here because he has pulled all the IRGC data. Like, I haven't gotten a look at it yet.
Yeah, he had a look at it as well.
Ever gotten a chance to look at the email dumps that they released a few days ago? I haven't even unpacked them yet.
We pulled them, but we haven't. Oh, okay. So we are live.
Yeah,
So keep all the,
I don't want to get talking on that just yet. Like, let's save it for 60 seconds from now when we're officially live.
There you go.
But,
give people a chance to join. The quality of the stream looks terrible. I'm hoping it's just my screen, but if anybody's looking, I don't know why, but it looks horrendous. Oh, our sponsor's in. All right, so I guess we can kick off. So as you might be able to tell from the absolutely shoddy organization and terrible quality and all the mess, Silas was busy today. So I'm obviously running this terrible working stream, but it's officially time. I don't know, Grug, you can take it away.
okay, cool. Thank you, Jags. So today is an awesome session of Glasshouse. We have with us Hamid Kashfi, who is going to be talking about hacktivist operations against Iran. And this is a parallel to last week's show where we had hacktivist operations against Belarus. So there's going to be a bit of compare and contrast going on, but primarily we're going to be talking about the predatory Sparrow operations, the train, the fuel, and the steel plant. And I understand Hamid believes that there's been a number of other things. I'm not sure what he is going to tell us about, but yeah, where should we start? The most recent predatory Sparrow attack, I guess, has been a leak of these 78 gigs of emails, which prove what the steel plant is connected to the Republican Guard. And I believe Dave has looked into that and has some opinions. You're on mute.
I think
You're muted there. Yeah, no, yeah, you are. No, it's great.
Okay.
Sorry.
Sorry. So, too late. You missed your chance.
it was nice to hear Dave's opinion on that.
Moving on.
See, I disagree, Dave. I don't think that's, I mean, you say that, but then.
Maybe 8200 did not want to hear my opinions.
Yeah,
leave
they
them
sabotaged
alone?
your microphone.
Leave
Getting too
8200
close to the
alone.
truth.
Well, all right. Like, I have so many opinions, so many, especially on this. First opinion, the whole community is ignoring it, which is a humongous point of data.
I've got a fucking thing I want to make on that. Okay, everyone is complaining that Ukraine doesn't have a cyber war, right? Like, where is the physical attacks? How come the critical national infrastructures are being taken out? Where is all like the big, like expensive, huge stuff? Motherfucker, it's in Iran. It's all happening in Iran. You can see the entire cyber war that you want to see in Iran. You're just fucking paying no attention to it. Everyone's ignoring it. It's right
No one
here.
wants to go to the art theaters, Greg. Full of hippies. You know how it is.
It's been playing in an art house for like 3 months, man.
Yeah. Everyone
great.
just wants to see Thor shirtless or whatever it is, you know? So, all right. So that's the first point though. Like, the community is like completely ignoring it. And part of that is because we ignore anything that is against our adversaries. I don't even want to say it's from our friends. I just want to say it's against our adversaries. It didn't happen, right? Like, and that's true in Russia as well, right? Like, it's hard to analyze that stuff. And that's an issue with the methodology of our sort of, social cyber, analysis team, right? People have like too many things in their heads. They're sort of like contradicting what they actually need to think about to do this right. Anyway, ignoring it. Secondarily, what are the norms that we're seeing in public? Everyone wants to talk about norms. What are the norms, right? So the predatory sparrows have a giant list of things that they're claiming. Has anyone backed that up, right? That requires that you read the emails. You have to typey with your little hands and read the emails. It's really hard. And then, of course, what has the response from Iran been? And how does it connect to everything else? Like, I'm not really even qualified to understand how it connects to everything else. I think like Silas and Juan have looked more and understand more about like Indra and all that stuff. And the other day I was on a podcast with someone and they were like, well, there's also this other group, Indra. And I'm like, I think that's the same group, just with like a different name, right? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, so there's a lot of confusion here, and it's one of the more important like contentions and systems to analyze. Anyway, so that's where I'm at. I'm like, people need to look at it. They're not looking at it. What the heck's people talking about? That's where go. Hamid, go.
Well, I would add
Actually,
one more.
Who's Hamid is something we should bring up for this podcast. Someone
We just picked
introduce
a
Hamid.
random person. We're like,
Just-
hey, you sounds about right. Let's
Hamid
put
got a
him
good
in there.
name.
Person to
We do
respond.
a podcast now.
What's that?
Hey,
Well,
Silas is here.
So we had a poll, and the first person to respond was Hamid, and so he gets to be today's special guest.
I won the
And-
lottery, yeah?
Yeah, so hopefully he knows something about cyber and predatory sparrow. We're otherwise it's going to be an awkward show. But yeah, Hamid, you want to say a bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I've been living in Iran. It's since like until 2010, which I moved out to Sweden to study and then continue my journey of poking computers. And midway, they poached me and I joined the community, been there for 10 years. And then I changed the ship and recently joined Trail of Bits. But that aside, I have been working on the offensive side of things for almost 18 years, I would say. Since 2003, officially, my paychecks have been only through this stuff. And along the years and over the earlier times before moving abroad, I have been working with some government clients, working with some private sector, doing research, doing offensive work. And as part of the things that pushed me forward and also out of the country was talking about and bringing it to the light, the shady things that the governments do. Like I was an Iranian, I was living in Iran, so I was focused on those stuff. And it started to create some frictions between me and the local government, and they didn't like some of the stuff that I was doing. And I was trying to push things in the right direction. Of course, governments don't like to be corrected. So long story short, I had to take an Uber from Iran to Europe, but the Uber car didn't show up on. I ended up riding a donkey outside of Europe. Yeah, and there were some, it was a long journey. Like, for those who don't know the context, I was in conflict basically with the intelligence service in Iran, and their cover story was that it's not going to be safe for me to travel abroad, and it's not going to be easy life for me out there. Their background mission or their idea was that by disconnecting my ties outside and by forcing me to stay in the country, I would be able to serve them and do what they want to do. And the more they pushed, the more aggressive I got, and the more serious conflict got. And I left the country, and along the process, over the years, they have done a couple of attacks. Biggest one, I think, was the DigiNotar and some other things that they were like stealing certificates from authorities, which I exposed and like made it to the big news. But when I already talked about their final goal, it's been an outdated news for me because I have already been blogging about it in Farsi like a couple of years before that. And nobody saw it coming. But for me, it was like, hey, this is what I've been telling you for a couple of years. This is how it ends up if you don't stop it. And then finally, Google and Firefox and some other bigger names, they acted upon and started to talk about it. And from then it became to their attention. And similar stuff happened, like they had a bunch of other operations that they were targeting students, they were targeting civilians in Iran, and they, my agenda has been, if they push, I push back. So that's that has created some interesting situations over the years. That includes blackmailing immunity, and Dave, which we had some fun times with a couple of years ago. But related to predatory sparrows and coming back to the subject you're talking about, there has been a lot of recent incidents about attacks against Iran. Predatory sparrows are being one of them, which following what Dave was saying, that nobody talks about them, I was also going to say that everyone only focuses on one big stone and focuses on one operation or one actor, instead of looking at the big picture, versus there are suddenly a big spike of parallel actors working against the Iranian targets. And each of them seem to be focusing on one different domain. Like predatory sparrows are focused on mainly infrastructure stuff, mainly very clean targeted attacks that look simple, but when you look under the hood, they are actually pretty sophisticated, and they're not just cyber operations. If you look at some of the details, for example, we will go through later on, like how they pulled off the attacks against the gas station. It was, I would say, an intelligence operation backing up a cyber operation, because the main part that I think is the main subject of our discussion today is how they are setting the norms and how they are making it safe for civilians, at least, to cause the minimum damage when they do their attacks. And the significant and distinguished part about Sparrows is that they go to a great length to put people out of the harm's way. And during that process, like that was kind of shocking to me, is they have gone to the great length of actually identifying individuals that are responsible and are like people in chain of command, like some of the military, some of them, like this is not something that a hacktivist group can go, hey, let's find a database of 7 million Iranians, find all of those who are in charge of fire bridge stations, they are in charge of like emergency ambulances and stuff. And right before the attack that we're gonna like seize all the operations of the gas stations, give them a targeted notification on Telegram that, hey, go tank up your ambulances and fire trucks because it's going to be offline for the next couple of days. This is not something that random individuals or disconnected hacktivist groups will be able to do. It involves you need to know the organizations, you need to know the people, you need to have their contacts, and then target them and inform them about the situation. That was one thing. And then on the Steel attack as well, they did a similar thing. They were watching live people basically passing the unsafe area and then pulling the trigger on whatever they were doing. So these are like some interesting points that we can discuss on its own. But what I wanted to circle back as well is that sparrows are not the only ones. Sparrows are the major ones. And actually, compared to some other cases, if you look at the effects, they are insignificant. For example, we have Labdukhtagan, we have like Adlali, like there are a ton of new sockpuppet APT groups and actor groups that are doing major attacks. They have access to like seriously scary infrastructure in the country that if someone is familiar with how things are interconnected in Iran and with the government, each of those attacks alone would highlight the fact that they are in a position, in a privileged position in a network that they can access to pretty much anything government related in the network. And they have proven that they have done it. And each of these groups are taking a different approach on how to use that access. Sparrows jump onto railway systems, they sabotage that. They jump to the gas station attacks, they sabotage that, and they have their own way of doing it. Labdukhtagan, they focus on leaking and doxing people and focusing on the groups that are, or companies or front companies that are working with the government for offensive works. Well, every country has them, and this is not something strange or something necessarily bad that's happening in Iran. Like it happens in US, it happens in Sweden, it happens in Iran too. That's nothing strange. But the fact that most people are ignoring is that these are targeted dogs and filtered dogs. in earlier cases, like if we circle back about, I think 2 years ago, I was looking at some of the dumps right in the middle of the discussions between Gulf countries, and Iran was also part of that. As soon as things start to get politically a little bit smooth and things start to like shape up in a way that irons out the conflicts between the countries in the region, suddenly there is a mysteriously new dump, a new cyber attack that spikes things back up. And in that particular case, which is why I started to get suspicious about these hacktivist groups, was that when you look at those dumps, which was about exposing one of these front companies that do cyber operations against targets in all around the world, basically. But they released some Excel files with list of targets, list of attack companies and stuff like that. Nobody saw it that there is no way that this group has only targeted these 6-7 countries. That's filtered out. It's like everyone like removed the major part of the Excel sheet and only exposed the relevant part related to what's going on right now in the region. And that causes, of course, the conflict. Like when Saudi Arabia is in negotiation with Iran and suddenly they see that, oh, there is this leak suddenly that shows that they have been actually attacking our infrastructure, like, and here is the proof for that. And nobody questions.
I thought cyber attacks were never escalatory, right? Like, but this is why I think it's so interesting. Like, you have this huge database of stuff in your head, but that whole database is completely missing from the United States and Europe policy understanding of how cyber works, because you're getting over here, there's this huge theory on like whether or not cyber can be escalatory or non-escalatory. But the only, like, the reality is that you're pointing just in casual conversation at literal attempts to make it escalatory where it has succeeded.
And that is a cyber attack that made a cyber attack escalatory, which is Inception. So
I think we're missing the larger point about the complete lack of social sciences in this field.
Anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Hamid. You have
Yes,
a lot
you
of stuff
did.
there. You're right. Actually, I did mean to interrupt you because I want to tie this into the big picture stuff, right? There's a big picture thing here. And I think we have a lot of questions too. Also, people, if you have questions in the stream chat, definitely, ping it out if you have especially questions for Hamid, since it is rare to get him in this kind of circumstance where you can ask him certain things.
Dave, let me just add one thing, because you said cyber attacks were never escalatory, unless there's a lawyer or politician in the room, in which case cyber attacks are always escalatory and we can't conduct any operations.
Right, of course.
Right.
This is
Carry
why
on.
that Max Smeets paper on like all the operations we didn't do felt like it was a preview. Like it really felt like he'd just given us the top sheet of what is probably an encyclopedic volume of operations we didn't do because of one lawyer in the room.
I think I need to reach out to Pete Pascucci, who was the lawyer at Cyber Command for a while, and see if he's willing to come on.
That'd be cool.
Oh, that'd be cool. Yeah, well, like one of the things I've said before is like you can measure the speed of an APT group by how many meetings there are before someone can hit enter. And I think it's worth remembering that a bunch of those meetings are going to have lawyers in them, and they're going to say no. So you don't necessarily have like 8 meetings and then you hit enter. You might have like 5 meetings and then it's done and it goes nowhere. And yeah, I think that is a worthwhile point. All of which has got nothing to do with predatory sparrow. So let's get back on track.
But let's start with the name, actually, because I think a lot of the Iranian groups, this was something that, I think they also use bird names. Isn't Parastu a bird? Am I confused?
Yeah, Parastu is basically sparrow. And one thing I wanted to sum up, like on the context I was talking about, is that we have these major like politics related cyber attacks that try to escalate or de-escalate things. That's one thing. And then we have this, if you look at the big picture, there are 2 other major points that I can bring it up, and then later on we can expand on it. First is how they are like putting all these little pieces of puzzles together. One is like infrastructure attacks, one is doxing people, one is exposing companies, exposing front companies and stuff. I had a note somewhere, if I can pull it out. I will send it out later. I was making a category of 4 types of attacks that we are observing happening in Iran. And based on the nature of each of these, you can categorize what the agenda might be. Part of it, I was saying that it's related to, of course, causing some infrastructure damage, mostly in response to what Iran does. Partly is the attacks and exposing and leaks that try to expose individuals working in the offensive side in Iran, which creates this deterrence and gives this kind of fear image in Iran that, hey, if you work with these front companies, there's a good chance that you will be exposed sooner or later. So stop doing that and stop joining that. And I think it has an effect on its own as well in Iran because, yeah, a lot of.
So your interpretation is that it's being used maybe as a deterrence mechanism, like leaking against individuals to get them not to take this sort of job.
That is, yeah, I think that's part of the reason, because if you look at the nature of the leaks that they have, again, here we are observing a lot of filtered and targeted leaks. Like I have been following many of these companies and many of these people from before they become like who they are or before they are experienced. The interesting part is that you never see, with some few exceptions, you never see major technical people's docs. You never see someone with proper capability of writing decent exploits, doing decent research, showing up in any of these researches. You never see any major live operations being doxed and exposed as it's happening or right after the incident goes public into the news. It's always some low-hanging fruits and some, I would say, burned information, which is another thing I would circle back to. Some burned information that possibly is already known to other services, to Iranian services, and it's like open secret. Everyone in the community, everyone close to what's going on knows them, but public doesn't know, media doesn't know, newspapers don't know about it, and everyone gets excited when they hear, but oh, there's this company that does that. Yeah, duh, they have been doing this for 10 years. Where have you been before? But the other part, so there is this like deterrence that by exposing them, they are trying to achieve something. And some of them might be legitimate activist groups that are complaining about the current situation in Iran. Yeah, those are fine. But these major names that we're talking about, none of them are seeming to look like as independent as they claim to be. That's one side. The other side, again, that someone without like knowing some context about what's going on in Iran between intelligence services is that part of these attacks are suspected to be also conflicts between IRGC and MIS. MIS being the intelligence ministry, IRGC, they have their own secret service, they have their own intelligence service, and they're kind of parallel organizations in Iran, the two of the major ones. There are more, but these two are the major ones. And they have historically had a lot of conflicts between them. And as part of these conflicts, to prove that one is weaker, one is more powerful, one has more access, one has more influence, they have been actually doing some cyber attacks against each other, exposing each other's resources. And some of them are kind of domestic cases that never make it to like European or American social media, obviously because it's not interesting, it's not relevant. But if you put these next to these external attacks, that these major cyber attacks that you see, somehow you also get suspicious that could any of these be part of those conflicts that they have between each other or not? We don't know, and it's very hard to prove that, because unless you connect any of these major APT groups and major leaking groups into something that proves that they are not domestic, which in most cases with SPARROWS, with Lab Lufthansa, with others, we kind of know. We still don't have a solid like technical proof, but reading between the lines, we can assume. So these groups we can rule out, but there are many other attacks that has been happening and lots of leaks internally happening on Iranian organizations and companies that A, nobody talks about them. They are domestic, of course. B, nobody considers why this is happening. Like 5 years ago, maybe one attack a year was happening against Iran, and it could be half major, and nothing super big. Right now, like past 2 years or even past 6 months, I can like talk about at least 10 major incidents. And by major, I mean nationwide, big organization-wide, each of them as large as the gas station attack. That's going on, that's happened, or that's been neutralized, but they don't make it to the news, and thus nobody talks about them, and therefore they don't account for it in their policy-making decisions or looking at the grand scheme of things and consider, hey, there was this gas attack, but what about this attack that's going on against the banking network for like almost a year now? Tons of banks have been compromised. There are lots of internal alerts about them and notifications sent to organizations to be alert about it. Yet you don't see a single public thing about it. You don't hear people talking about it. Versus this, if this goes off as a bomb, which my prediction is it will eventually sooner or later, it would be worse, if not as bad as the gas station attack.
So could you tell us a little bit more about because as you said, we haven't heard anything about these banking attacks. So please enlighten us.
It's all tidbits, right? Like, I mean, Hamid, you and I looked into the gas pump attack together, and like, you've been super helpful to me because I don't understand the local context at all. But like, part of the issue is our sourcing is almost entirely either someone lets slip a comment somewhere that they shouldn't have, or hey, look, here's an article from a newspaper in, Persian and Farsi out there that happens to kind of mention the attack in like 2 lines. So like, there really doesn't feel like there's any authoritative reporting that you can point to and be like, okay, if these guys said it, then it really happened and we can take it from there. Like, even the steel mill thing, like we were watching the video and we're like, I mean, did they
could be anything.
Did they repurpose an industrial accident video and pretend that it was an attack, or like, did it really happen? And their denials on the other end and the Iranian end, it's like, well, that rings hollow too. Like, do you believe them when they say no?
And could that be the purpose of this email dump, purely that, as opposed to just like what they say in their tweet fields, to bring it back to predatory sparrow, I guess, is we want to show you how this steel plant is connected to the IRGC. But it could just be like, this really happened. We really do have their emails. Hence, it is possible. Does that make sense?
I wouldn't think it's that much related to proving who they are and what kind of access they have, because if their audience would be the Iranian government and the groups that are like doing attacks on their behalf, they already know like what they are dealing with, because as I mentioned, there is much more happening that's not making it to the surface, and we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg. In case of like SPARROWS, for example, the railway attack, of course, was major, but it's not something that on its own would make it a significant hack. Well, similar to Russia, like we have seen a similar case of sabotaging systems. They kept it a little bit more safe and just posted those messages on the billboards and stuff. What I don't think I've ever mentioned it publicly, but like what made that case significant for me was that they wiped computers and they did some sabotage in a related, I think it was Marine and Ports and Marines organization, which was a similar attack related to those. They also wiped the systems. There is this like Chaplin wiper that's now attributed to them. And well, in most attacks, they sabotage the systems. What put this one aside and was kind of jaw-dropping was that they didn't wipe the computers with just random bits and bytes and some junk data or zero the disk. They wiped the disk with classified information that anyone who would do the forensics work on those systems would be like, holy shit. Not only they have pulled off this attack, but they are dumping some classified information that's like nobody is ever supposed to know this stuff. Not only they know, they are ridiculing you and they are teasing you by wiping your disk with those information. Like this is something that we'll probably never, like you will probably never see or hear proof of it, that you can actually say, hey, this was a dump, because that brings to another point that I was going to go through, is that Iran holds dearly close all these forensics artifacts related to these major attacks. And you basically see some drips off of third-party companies that do forensics works that are already filtered. And when they publish it, again, everything like that, everything we read from the Iranian sources that do actually technical work, they're nice, they are helpful sometimes, but they are heavily filtered as well. Like you only see the wiper part, you never see where they started to get into the network. You never hear them analyzing, okay, they attacked the Tehran municipality with 3,000 CCTVs spread across the country. You only hear, oh, they came in, they just wiped some disks, they got access to the Active Directory, and they said goodbye. What about those 3,000 cameras? What about those infrastructure that has major intelligence value for whoever has access to this network? And they decided burning it is worth more than actually using it, or maybe they have other footholds. Point is, I lost the thread. It's
Well,
what
you're
I'm
saying
saying
Let
is
me, let's,
that
everybody
there's
sort of
not
jumped
enough,
in.
you know, like there's not enough information sharing or public-private partnerships is
No,
what
no,
I'm
no,
hearing.
no, 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 no.
so
No.
one point to sum it up is that we, like Juan also mentioned, that we don't have any connections and many solid proofs of what's happening, and we only read it in the news. My point was that Iran heavily filters and guards those technical details and basically cracks down on anyone and any company that tries to disclose them. So whatever we hear is what Iran wants us to hear and see about these incidents, which is very interesting because for some cases, they don't disclose anything, they deny it. For some other cases, they publish technical details, but it's filtered. And back to SPARROWS again.
Do they publish that attacks happened, which didn't? Like, do they also have fake ones? Like, oh no, the predatory sparrow made it so that we had a brownout with our electricity, and it has nothing to do with the fact that we forgot to provision enough.
Yeah, they sometimes brag about like foiling out attacks that has been attempted, but they didn't succeed. But they are so insignificant compared to what actually happens and what people talk about. So you barely hear about them. And some of them are to advertise their homemade like defense systems and monitoring systems, but it's irrelevant to the subject. Back to SPARROWS about these leaks was that to this date, there is still not a single proper forensics report or even an official statement about the technical details of the attack. The only thing that was made public was a company called Modaberan. They did a forensical report. Well, full disclosure and credit to them, they mentioned a couple of times and clearly that, hey, we don't have access to any technical details. This is our speculations based on the fact that we have worked with this system before. So they were basically going through some potential ideas that how this might have happened. Most of them were irrelevant because they were basically just copying Ingenico company's technical documents and speculating on how this might have gone wrong. So that is the only official source. And then another like major, very interesting thing about SPARROWS is that suddenly out of nowhere, well, you see people upload stuff to VirusTotal normally, and they upload the wiper and they upload some payloads and shell scripts and stuff. That's not unexpected. Anyone watching what's happening in Iran can monitor those activities and VirusTotal uploads from Iranian IP addresses and finds interesting stuff by just using some keywords. We did it as well. What we have never seen before, at least to my knowledge, correct me if I'm wrong, is that who would upload forensical memory dumps of systems to VirusTotal right after this attack? Like, I think, Juan, correct me if I'm wrong, it was like 3 weeks down the investigation we were doing that
Yeah, it might have been even less.
Yeah, so what happened was that I was speculating about why and how this could have happened with Juan. And then I came up with some keywords based on the connections I found in proposals that the oil company have posted before to handle their VSAT communications, handle technical support. From there, I reached the point that I found a bunch of company names. And when we searched those company names in VirusTotal uploads, we found a bunch of binaries. And from those binaries, we found a couple of memory dumps uploaded to VirusTotal. That was also unique. And on its own, those dumps are, at the beginning, we assumed to be mistakes of the forensics team because they couldn't make heads or tails out of it. They must have uploaded everything to the VirusTotal to see what matches. But that doesn't really make sense if you are actually doing forensics for a living. This is like the very last thing you want to do, especially considering the fact that a lot of sensitive information are in those dumps, including source code of the products, which we looked at, including cryptographic keys, which I validated, including VPN credentials, passwords, some clear text credentials, all of these, like, I was just like, this doesn't make any sense. And the upload was one from a French IP address, could be a VPN, could be
OV8.
something interesting. Yeah. But the measures were like from these two IP addresses, everything was uploaded. And it makes you think twice that, is it actually a mistake, or they want you to see some stuff that the government don't want you to see? And the way we looked at it, it actually turned out to show a lot of details. Like I have this blog draft that I have been cooking for ages here and collecting dust. We never published it. So there, like I can go through it later on if you want to explain how the system worked. But in short, the gas station, the fuel system is not exactly what the Iranian government claims it to be, independent and offline system, not connected to the internet. And it's not as Iranian homemade as they claim it to be. It turned out a lot of it is borrowed frameworks and commercial products, which are now obsolete, from this French company Ingenico, and they have customized it for their needs. Kudos to them, it works fine, but it's far from what they claim it to be. And
There's a lot
what
of
is
that.
done,
I mean,
yeah,
so like just kind of interjecting in there, because I think only Hamid and I really saw what was going on inside of those systems. Like it's not that we kept our mouths shut, but like we were looking and looking and looking, and we're looking for some kind of malware or something that would really be a smoking gun. But the more that we came to understand the system, as Hamid says, like it's a patchwork of technologies that are terribly outdated, horribly configured. And what you come to realize that there really didn't need to be some insane payload. Like this is, Iranian networks are, I think, by inadvertent design, Swiss cheese. Like everything's outdated, everything is old, everything is, you know, a stolen copy of this thing taped together with this other piece of software and so on. So when you look at the gas pump attack, as far as we could tell, it looked like someone had come in, used their own internal management panel to push out a bad piece of firmware to these Ingenico devices at the gas pumps that showed the, you know, 64411 number on them, and that was it. Like there really wasn't some massive technical capability. Not to say that they didn't have it, it's that they didn't need it. The way the system was designed is like you could shoot an email and it would execute it as a command, like as a root user within the thing. And I'm guessing that they thought it was only like internally manageable, but once you're already inside of the Ministry of Oil, like what does that mean? So it's not to kind of put down the sophistication of the attacker, it's to put down the required sophistication for the attack. And I think, you know, Hamid understands the context better, but like there is a point at which you look at all these things coming up and it's like, to what extent are we the useful idiots in a part of this where we are supposed to come out and make some big claim against either predatory Sparrow or for the Iranians or whatever, when they're clearly uploading their IR materials for us to look at.
So yeah. This is exactly what I wanted to ask about. Like, what was like, I'm going to pass it to Hamid, but what would be the reason for uploading those images? So, you know, we were talking earlier about how predatory Sparrows they've made a huge effort to show that when they do these attacks, they don't hurt people. Like they've gone out of their way at least twice with, you know, the few.
So that's an interesting subject about it. Yeah. So there are 2 points about it. A, they mentioned publicly that, hey, we found more serious vulnerabilities, but we actually did not exploit them and reported them to the vendor. And nobody heard what those details were, and nobody could back up their claims. Everyone saw that the gas stations were down, pumps were sabotaged, and that's the worst thing that could happen. But the dumps proved that it could be much, much, much worse. And on top of that, like when they make these claims, of course, you would wonder, is it actually true or not? So naturally, what I did, I got in touch with them, and they sent me back a screenshot of the email that they sent to Ingenico, which was the technical details of the vulnerability they reported to the vendor. And I didn't actually like do proper work and research on it, but from the looks of it and from the technical details, what they found was that it was actually possible and not super complicated to completely break the device. So into an irreversible position. But what we saw is that I'm just gonna read from the notes that what makes it significant and prove the point that they could do worse, but they didn't, is that the way these gas stations work and operate, in a very short summary, is that there are these POS systems that are connected to some middle server, to some servers in the gas stations, and these gas station servers are connected to some middle, they call it pooler servers, and those pooler servers are connected to the data centers. They had access to all of these, and the only thing they did was updating the configurations on some POS servers and wipe out some gas station middle servers. What they could have done, which would have been way more hard and complicated to recover from, was that they could erase and damage POS terminals by just this very vulnerability that they disclosed it privately to me. I don't know if they like posted it elsewhere. Not today, I don't see anything, but I might not be the only one who received that screenshot. So they could have damaged the POS to a point that they had to replace, like someone had to go and unscrew and like do a hardware jump on the device and restore the memory mesh. They didn't do that.
That's where I would like pull out a little, like, sorry to interrupt you, Hamid, but like it's not the only time. Like you mentioned them calling the emergency services, they are displaying the fact that they could have done way worse with the gas pumps, right? Like they could have properly bricked them and they didn't. And we're getting this sense of this purposeful signaling of, look at how responsible we are, right?
Exactly.
We could have done way worse, but we didn't. We could have caused potential harm to civilians, but we went out of our way to make sure that we wouldn't, to whatever extent you can. Yeah, we did the steel mill thing, but we made sure that we didn't harm any civilians. And hey, these are sanctioned companies anyways. Like, it's incredibly unusual, not just because it's like obviously a hacktivist front for a government, but it's almost like they're, no, I'm saying like this stream is a constant discussion about what it looks like to be a responsible threat actor. And most people just tell us to go fuck ourselves. And then you look at this hacktivist group and they are, I mean, we're engaged in a conversation of sorts of saying, hey, yeah, no, it's a steel mill, but look, it's a sanctioned steel mill, and we didn't harm any civilians. And like, look at this other attack, like we made sure. It's like, this is unusual to an nth degree.
Well, as we need to ask Max's question, right? Because I'm not going to be like, ask questions and then not ask their question. So Max asked a question and he says, Hamid, what do you think is predatory Sparrow's end goal?
I would say they are trying to show to Iran that don't do this kind of attacks against infrastructure. We can do it. We can do much more, but we are not doing it. And if we do it, we are doing it in a controlled way. And the short example I gave it, I think, with Risky Business, this podcast I was writing with this gentleman, I forgot his name. I was summarizing it in a point that Iran, when they get access to a network, they just swing their axe and damage and destroy everything and make a victory lap and walk out of it. Versus most of the cyber attacks we're watching against Iran, at least the specific ones with Sparrows, they come in, they don't just drop in. They do their research, they make planning, they do as little damage as possible that's necessary to deliver their message. They leave some information out that, hey, we did this little thing, but here is the proof that we could do much worse. So mind your next move. Next time you try to manipulate our water purification system and poison people, realize that we could have fucked up your country in a much worse situation, but we didn't. So watch and learn. This is what they are doing, I think. And the other interesting part was, I took a note again somewhere. I keep forgetting about it. Damn it.
So, Hamid, I
For
want to talk
something that
about
you just
messaging with the fuel as well. Like I want us to get to that. Sorry.
So go ahead.
No, Jack, you were saying a thing.
No, I just wanted to cut in and say, I mean, Hamid just kind of pointed out the one thing we haven't discussed at all in this whole thing, which is obviously, you know, there's a lot of assumptions about attribution, you know, whatever, but we're acting like this is a one-handed handshake, right? Like there's a lot of signaling and restraint, but it also isn't just happening because someone decided to come like smash their fist over Iran unprovoked and with no particular responses. There seems to be this tit for tat nature, and I love the responsibility aspect of it, but it definitely, I think this is one of those cases where we would be right to say that there is some signaling happening, and it is mostly capability signaling going, hey, you know, you keep fucking around, you're almost ready to find out, and you could find out in this way and that way and the other way and the other way and the other, and like it's a really interesting conversation in a sense between these two attackers.
Yeah, so
The technical term for that, by the way, is tacit bargaining. if you're
Mother-
wondering.
Dave read one IR paper and he will not shut the fuck up about tacit bargaining ever since. This is the danger of IR, you know, check to make sure that your kids are not reading anything about IR before it's too late.
Poisoned his mind with this.
Yeah. So the thing I wanted to get Hamid to cover is the context of these attacks is actually incredibly important, and it's something that we don't understand because we're outside of the cultural context in which they're supposed to happen. And like I've read a draft of his blog post, and to me the big thing that I took away from it on the fuel attack was how much the attack was actually meant as a messaging, like the message that was generated by the attack was the actual attack. Like the cyber bit was sort of more of the way that they achieved the thing that they were trying to do. And I would love if Hamid could show us the context and explain that.
Yep.
'Cause that
So
is all-
so there is a technical part of it that we all like tear apart and try to reverse and do those kind of things, but then there is the social aspect of it. When the fuel attack specifically, if we look at how and why it happened and when it happened, that's I think the most significant part about it. The non-technical part of it is that fuel in Iran has been subsidized, and they have deployed this quota system since 2007 that everyone gets a limited amount of fuel. I don't know, whatever liters per month. And after that, they have to pay a triple price for their fuel. And Iran over the years increases the prices, that of course causes inflation, and everyone is complaining with the government. But in 2019, I think it was, if I'm not mixing up the date, in November 2019, they did the same thing, except this time the increase of the price was so drastic that people started rioting in the streets. Like the subsidized price overnight, without any early notification to people, was increased by 50%. And then the free gas price, which you should pay from your pocket, and if you want to like use more fuel than that, 200% increase overnight. Imagine what kind of inflation that would create in a country of 60 million. And of course, it caused riots and it caused conflicts, and people got killed by the government in the street by tens. People get injured by thousands in the street. And today, it's still a major return point in the history of recent Iran that people go and talk to about that. Hey, look at how violent and brutal the government has been, cracking down on people for something as basic as hey, we can't afford bread, we can't afford food for our families. This is why we are in the street. We don't care who is in charge of the politics. We don't care how you're dealing with I don't know, nuclear negotiations and stuff. We need food. We are hungry. And they cracked down on people and killed them and injured them in thousands like that for this reason. And what stands out here is that the date that the gas station attack happened was the second anniversary of those riots in the street that people got killed. And this, again, I didn't hear or read anywhere that's being discussed about. So part of it is the technical message to the government. The other part, which kind of relates to that deterrence that I mentioned before, that kind of scares people out of doing things. It also seems to be trying to deliver a message to civilians that, hey, your government, here is a reminder about what your government has done to you, and here is a little bit response to that. And my expectation or my estimate was that because of the specific timing and because it was still fresh, it would lead to some major conflicts in the, like people coming out and having protests and stuff like that. None of that happened, surprisingly, which is interesting on its own. But we have like this major case, and then we have other recent attacks. For example, the very recent one against the Tehran municipality network. Most people don't see it as how it actually is. What media says that they talk about the municipality network. Of course, they have access to some infrastructure and they have been hacked and their systems were down. End of story. But they dumped some information, and there is a forensics report, again, only covering the wiper part and not talking at all about what happened, what they have been able to access to. But in the dumps, we are seeing that they are showing this message to users that, hey, we had access to all CCTV cameras in the city. It's like a wet dream for intelligence services to have that kind of access to a country. Imagine being able to interactively monitor every single street in that, every major street and highway and location in a country for whatever purpose you need to have. So this is not by Sparrow. It was this Lapluftgun made this dump. And this is attributed to MEK, Mujahideen al-Khalq, which is an opposition group against the Iranian regime, which they have literally zero cyber capabilities. But someone is using them as a cover to deliver their messages. Like they hacked the live TV broadcast and put MEK messages. They hacked the Tehran municipality and use their cover to dump these attacks. But if you go and look at the dumps and technical details that they are releasing in their Telegram channel, it is freaking scary. I'm familiar with those networks because of what I've been doing before, and I've actually like tested and poked those networks before. So for me, it was not super news. But when you look at it, if to compare it, I would say it's as bad as exposing every single NSA interception post that's happening, that's working in Europe, for example, or in a specific city, that, hey, you know, these cameras, these systems, they are actually connected to police. And then they dump emails between organizations, between municipality and the local police force that, hey, here are the credentials to access our live feed. Full disclosure, we have no responsibility from this point. So whatever you do with this access, with these live feeds, it's up to you. But then again, this is not something, it's open secret. Yeah, people talk about it in Iran, that they know that, hey, there's the traffic cameras and they might be using it for surveillance, but no, there was no proof until this point.
So just to summarize that, like there's CCTV cameras everywhere, including for traffic and all that. There were rumors that it was being used by the police for surveillance and monitoring. Someone dumped all of the logs and access showing that the police were using them, and then dumped emails showing that access was provided by the local municipalities who were like, the access to these CCTVs fell off the back of a truck. I sure hope no one abuses them. We wouldn't know if they did. Is that correct? Like, did I?
Yeah, so what I have only saw like a few of the documents that they're leaking. So there's probably a lot more context into it. But the parts that stood out for me was they exposed a list of cameras with IP addresses and credentials and stuff. So it's a very major thing. I would say it's even worse than the attack against the Evin prison, which they dumped like footages of the prisons and how they are treated. Like opening parentheses, that was interesting as well, because right at the time that attack happened, there was the discussion against the way they brutally treat prisoners in that prison and how inhuman the situation is there. And suddenly, out of nowhere, you see this major leak of internal videos and CCTV systems. And watching some people speculated that they got a copy of the videos and hard drives and stuff like that. But there is a live footage of the attackers watching the operators watching the attack, which shows that this is a live feed. This is not something offline or some insider plugging a USB or something, which circles back to another point that all of these government-related networks and organizations and systems. In Iran, there is this like government network that interconnects everything and supposed to be the private internet for Iranian organizations. And pretty much any major incident we're watching these days that's going down is connected to that network. So this should tell you something about that, that if that network is compromised to a point that A, they cannot control anything, B, they have access to so much stuff and so much details, like classified information, court orders, like prison systems, CCTVs of the entire country, public transportation, gas attacks, some police internal systems, like the organization that basically controls imports and exports or issues passports, like literally everything that is of intelligence value is already exposed. Either we have heard about them publicly and it's been discussed, or it's ongoing and people are still trying to foil it. But sorry, Dave asked a question I missed. But
yeah, so we've got one question from the Twitch stream, which was, how do you think countries other than, say, Israel, view the predatory Sparrow attacks? Like, how are other people processing this? What do you think this looks like to, Europe and so on?
that's, I think, a question that like I shouldn't come up with an answer right away on the spot. But the way I see it is different countries. I don't know. I have not looked from the other side perspective, other countries, but I assume any of these major leaks and major dumps is an advantage for other countries in discussion with Iran about something as a bargaining chip. For example, Iran talks about human rights and blah, blah in public in some discussion. And right at the same time, there is this leak about Evin prison and they say, you talk about human rights. How about fixing what you're doing at home first? Iran goes and brags about attacking Israeli like infrastructure and the metro and subway system that doesn't even exist and stuff like that. They have a bunch of cases. And then there is the bargaining chip that say, okay, you probably did something that another country came back to your like fueling system and stuff like that. Or Iran, for example, downs the US drone like that almost escalated by Trump's order to attack Iran. Like that happened. And soon after that, another like targeted message by US, this was officially, I think, announced, was that they don't go hack some random infrastructure, some random military networks. They go and sabotage and take down the exact control center room that ordered the attack against that missile through cyber attack. That's another like pretty fucking bold message, I would say, that, hey, we are watching you, watching us, and we can destroy your watching devices. So back off and don't do that. Iran tries to do the same. Sometimes they succeed, sometimes they don't. But the level of the sophistication and the level and cleanness and professionalism of delivering the message is on just like two different territories.
Excellent. Unfortunately, we are going to have to end there because we're down to the last 4 minutes, and I would love to keep going, but we're going to have to do a hard stop. So, Hamid, hopefully you will join us again to talk more.
Absolutely.
Sparrows, if you're watching, please give us more content to discuss.
We asked them to, I offered them to join the discussion or have some comments on my draft. So we will see. I think it has to go through chain of commands and it will take time, but it was a long shot.
Yeah,
Are you planning to release that at some point?
I would love to. It's just I've been so busy. And that was the thing. Like a lot has happened. And the more you look into it, the more complicated it gets. That I'm like, I prefer to not publish some half-cooked research and work and wait for it to build up and build up. But I think at some point we have to put a pin on it and just post it as it is, because it will never end, I think.
Good. Done is better than good.
Yeah,
remember that.
I agree.
I mean, at the risk of angering our predatory Sparrow friends, I will say that there is no comprehensive write-up about half of these attacks. Like what we published on Meteor Express was like really early on. Everything Checkpoint's been putting out is like a sliver of time with no like overarching view. There's nothing on the gas pump attack. There's nothing that's not in Persian about the new attacks with the Forsaken Wiper and stuff. So I mean, it's not the worst thing to consider kind of dropping some of that. So
like basically, there's JD, there's Juan, and there's Hamid. So, and then I guess Checkpoint as well. So 3 out of the 4 people writing about this are like on Glasshouse or Glasshouse affiliated. So, you know, you can definitely shape the discussion on that. Unless we have another super quick thing from the Twitch stream, I guess we're going to close it out. Predatory Sparrows, if you can get approval, we would love to have you on. We know how to do this with like anything you need to do to be safe, we will do. Like we can set up a chat bot.
we're becoming an outlet for hacktivist messaging over here.
Yeah, like the hacktivist daytime TV.
Fair enough.
There we go.
One funny thing happened, like just a quick plug that also went unnoticed, I would say, is that like a while back I tweeted something that, hey, not all of these hacktivist groups are actually individual independents, and some of them are government affiliated, and watch out for them. Don't fall for anything that they leak and discuss. And a couple of days ago, one of them actually posted in their group this Labduchtigan that, hey, we are independent. We are not sock puppets of any country, but we work with any country. And it was a funny response, an immediate response they had to it. But then we have this message in their group that they are willing to donate $50,000 worth of reward for whoever that gives them some information about some of the things that they are interested in. And what kind of hacktivist group has this kind of budget, if they actually even gonna do it? So that was the side funny point.
It's okay. Predatory Sparrow is going to donate. It's going to give the data to Labduchtigan. Labduchtigan will pay Predatory Sparrow. It's going to work out.
And the only ones that will win out from it will be the whoever gets the Bitcoin transaction fees.
Okay, so
Wrap it up.
thank you very much for joining us, Hamid. You know, closing out, Dave, Silas, Mike, Pablo, Juan, and myself. This has been absolutely fascinating. Thank you, and you know, remember to subscribe, like, ring the bell, and join our Patreon, Coffee. We have some new merch. We'll have links for that in the description. And you know, don't forget, get your Ridge wallet when you're signing up for Raid Shadow Legends. We will again, there's a discount code. If you're getting Nord, you can sign up now they pay you $20 and you get 3 years of access. So be sure to use our code for that.
Setter
right.
Substack, Setter Stack.
Oh yeah,
Don't
and
forget to
the
subscribe.
Setters.
It was nice talking to you all, guys.
Yeah, thank you for coming on today.
Thanks,
Cheers.
Hamid. Thanks, everybody.